Let's get started with vulnerability assessment. When performing vulnerability assessment, you will be required to identify vulnerabilities and then determine some sort of ranking and prioritization. Usually, this involves the usage of automated tools that scan the network for vulnerable services and weak configurations, and then provide detailed reports about the types of vulnerabilities that have been found. Although you will probably not be able to completely secure your environment to the point that it will never be breached, you can use vulnerability assessment to identify weaknesses and then strategically reduce the opportunities that attackers have to breach your system. When you start to look at the market for vulnerability scanning tools, you will quickly realize that there are many types of vulnerability scanners available to you. It is important to note that each may have different areas of focus or specialty. This becomes less apparent as many of the vulnerability management tool providers are trying to expand their growth into areas that is outside of their original domain of expertise. For instance, it is not uncommon to see a network vulnerability management tool that also provides some basic level of configuration management verification or that provides web application vulnerability findings for a small subset of vulnerability types, such as the OWASP Top 10. Capabilities that you will run into may include configuration baseline scanning. Typically, this will require some sort of elevated privilege so that the scanner can review key security settings such as file permissions or common misconfigurations. Discovery. Almost all of the modern vulnerability management tools will have an aspect of asset or application discovery. This stems from the need to understand the environment before it can be secured. Identification. Scanners will need to be able to identify vulnerabilities. This is typically an effort that is signature or pattern-based. The vulnerabilities will need to be predefined within the vulnerability management tool, or it will not be able to find the issue. There are other techniques that can be used, but these become rather complicated at times and can vary dramatically depending on the implementation used by the vendor. Prioritization. Many vulnerability assessment tools will have the ability to provide some arbitrary rating to the results that it gathers. This intends to make the results more user-friendly and to weed out some of the noise. Unfortunately, this can also often lead to a false sense of security, as many organizations will blindly base all of their remediation efforts on the items that the automatic scanner has identified as critical or high, and they will then simply ignore issues that fall outside of that threshold. As you begin to test environments, you will find that many of the footholds that are gained during an attack are based on vulnerabilities that are rated low to medium. The attacker then chains these attacks to gain further access until they get what they were after in the first place. Reporting. Many vulnerability scanners provide great reporting functionality that is similar to what you would see when working with business intelligence software packages. This includes canned reports that are focused on specific needs, such as regulatory requirements, or other types of reports that provide the user with very granular control over what the report should look like and what their output formats should be. Most vulnerability scanners are customizable. They allow the user to modify various settings so that the scans will only run the types of testing that the analyst wants them to. This can be very useful when working with unstable environments that have special bandwidth or other scan impacting requirements. Some of the best vulnerability scanners have adaptive capabilities. These scanners are able to identify the platforms and applications that are being tested and then decide to only run those tests that are applicable to the system. This can save a lot of time when performing scans on very large environments. It is important to understand that automated vulnerability scanners will often provide reports that contain false positives, Organizations with large attack surfaces will often be challenged with vulnerability assessment reports that are hundreds of pages long. They will then need to somehow eliminate all of the false positives that were identified so that the real vulnerabilities can be addressed. If not properly managed, this activity could potentially divert the vulnerability management team from spending their time on threats that are real.